Hey folks, it's been a while.
It's been quite a while, yeah.
Too
Too long.
You've missed us. You know you have. You're welcome that we're back. And also, yeah, we've been doing a couple things for the past couple months. Like life started lifing. I moved. Everybody got fired.
Yeah, so Virginia moved. Our workplace kind of imploded a little bit. So we had a lot of work stress,
Yeah.
including losing a lot of beloved colleagues
And friends.
who have been there for a long time. And then, not to make it about us, but a little bit of survivor's guilt comes along with that. So grateful to still be there, but it's been a really tough road at work. So we
Yes,
have
it
been
has.
quite distracted with all of those things. But Virginia moved, which is a really exciting thing.
That is exciting, but again, also distracting. And then
Yeah.
also found, everybody got fired after I moved, so that was awkward for a whole slew of other reasons.
Yep. But her moving has given us this really lovely new studio space in her new home, which is beautiful.
Yeah, we will be
Which she
decorating
calls
it. And
the Speakeasy.
it is. We call it the Speakeasy.
So welcome to our Speakeasy. Forget studio.
Oh,
This is our speakeasy where we hold
so much
funerals.
cooler.
Yeah, I
but
don't know if
we hold what?
funerals.
Oh, I was like, we hold funerals.
She's
I thought you
like-
were going to say seances, and I was like, no, we don't.
It hasn't been that long since we've recorded. We hold what? What are you talking about right now?
What is it about?
Literally the name of the podcast. You might see some doggies show up too because our puppies are here. So yeah, she moved in this beautiful new home, which is lovely and very close to our work. So that took a lot of time and effort on her part. And
And just life in general.
yeah,
is-
I've been having some health stuff that's
That's
not
not
been
great.
fun. So not to make this an episode of
what was us?
mystery diagnosis or
Oh, yeah.
anything, but like I am currently losing my vision and we can't figure out why. So we think it's autoimmune, and I'm seeing some really wonderful doctors at UVA, but they
it's
cannot
alarming.
figure out. It is very terrifying. I'm completely blind in my right eye at this point and losing vision in my left eye. So if any of you have experience with autoimmune retinopathy, and the weird ways that it progresses, but preferably how to make it go away. And
reverse itself.
Yes, that would be amazing. So I'm at UVA a lot for appointments and stuff too. So things have just gotten out of hand. Mostly our job just keeps getting in the way. I mean, that was a theme before.
Right?
These day jobs are killing us.
They are.
40 hours a week plus.
Yeah.
I wish.
Plus all, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, we work 40 hours a week.
And then we clock out. No, the lesson planning and the grading and stuff, nobody cares. But look, this is why we haven't been here.
And-
we would much rather have been with you than dealing with some of the really crappy stuff we've been dealing with. But we're back.
Yeah, it's only been like a blink. It's a
only
blink
been
in
a
the
minute.
eye.
It's been a minute. And so we actually have two really exciting funerals coming up for y'all. But before, since it's spooky season, repping the black cat, repping the ghosts, since it's spooky season, we wanted to do a kind of fun spooky-ish episode, which is what we're going to do today.
Absolutely.
All right. Shall we jump in?
Let's do it.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Welcome to Your Funeral podcast. This is our sort of special episode. It's not a mini episode because it's going to be long. The dog literally pulled the curtains down to this room. Has she done that before? Did she save
Nope.
that for us? All right. So what we're going to talk about today, and I'm really excited. You're going to hear my voice a lot because I'm going to be the one talking, telling some stories to you all and to Virginia.
And I'll be the one interrupting.
She's going to interrupt, which is amazing. I think we've really planned this based on our personalities.
Really, like I'm just going to interrupt everything she says.
I like to talk at people incessantly, right? Like way beyond their capacity to listen. And Virginia's going to make me more interesting by interrupting and being like, oh my God, your voice is killing me. So the topic we chose for today, I think I'm going to call this episode, if Virginia's okay with it. She doesn't know this yet. When I was big.
Ooh,
Because
that's
this
clever.
comes up in a lot of the stories.
It
I didn't
does.
even come up with it, so it's not that clever. I just saw it a lot. So,
Okay. All right, let's do it.
today I'm going to talk about something that I find fascinating and creepy, which kind of like marks me out as like a super white lady, like a super white American, because I don't understand it in the way that other cultures understand it. It's not a part of our cultural awareness, and we don't really accept it as a thing, I think. So, and specifically, it's kids who talk about past lives. So that's why I think the title should be "When I Was Big," because that's how they sometimes will start telling these stories to their parents. Well, when I was big. I used to smoke
which is
cigars, you know.
way better than what I called it in the studio, which was creepy kids.
Creepy kids.
Because, I mean, to be fair, it probably takes a lot of parents off guard, and it's got to be a little creepy when your kid's like, when I was big.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine a parent hearing that for the first time being like, oh, cool, tell me more. Yeah, like totally chill about it. I can't imagine it. But I'm not chill about anything, so that might explain why I cannot imagine a parent being chill.
Reason.
Literally ever. So, of course, in lots of religions, Hindu, Buddhism, Sikhs, the reincarnation is a central sort of part of that religious tenet. So you find a lot of these stories in countries where where those religions are prominent. So
Yes.
a lot of the researchers who are starting out, and I'll talk about in a minute, are doing this in India, Southeast Asia, those kinds of places where it's like a little bit more, like less surprised. Like a parent might be like, cool, right? Like unlike we would be. Okay, so, and you might know, I had to look this up because I sometimes care about details and I sometimes don't. But America is like at this point almost 70% Christian. And so Christianity, yeah. And that's actually declined, which you probably also know. But
I do not know any of that.
Yeah,
but
so
okay.
like people sort of professing or like identifying themselves as Christian has gone down. I think it used to be at like 78% 20 years ago or something like that. So at any rate, overwhelmingly Christian. Reincarnation ain't up in it.
Yeah.
That I know of.
Not in my upbringing.
I'm not an expert. Yeah, the Catholics aren't big on the
They're
reincarnation.
not big on that whole reincarnation thing. They
Well,
are big on, never mind. Like rising after death. Does that count?
Oh.
I mean, like the whole Jesus, like the
I
whole
don't think
story is
she
like.
was like, what is it with the guy?
the guy with the thing.
The
with
rising up and the whatnot.
So I guess, does that count? I guess we don't call it
I
reincarnation.
think that's what it's called. Yeah. So at any rate, so I think most Christian religions do not include
My
this,
bad.
if any of them. And so we will find, a lot of the stuff that I read around, I was reading around lots of places, and lots of times you'll see parents who are really hesitant to believe because of their Christian faith, and they feel like it's kind of inconsistent, right? So they want to make it make sense in their world, but to their credit, all of the parents that I read about came around to it. So it was just one of those things. Like for me, I'm like, you tell me one thing, I don't need to verify it. I believe you. Like if a kid said like, hey, remember that time I was, in a movie and I was a big movie star and I dated Marilyn Monroe. I'd be like, what? I believe you 100%.
Yeah,
And the kid
I
could have just
remember.
read it on the internet. I'd be like, cool. And but these parents kind of, they were skeptical, but they did the work to kind of figure out. And I think also just faced with the evidence that some of these kids have is wild. Like
I am so excited.
absolutely wild. And so I think sometimes you have to be like, I'm the asshole. Like a 2-year-old did not make up the story, right? Like you would have had no ability to get to this details. So, yeah.
So the bottom line is, Beth has done kind of a deep dive into research about these children that are not creepy at all. They're actually just bigger than they were when they were little. Yeah, I don't. Anyway, and I know nothing other than my skeptical science self, being all and like raised Catholic and a scientist. So I'm going to have a lot of questions. And I do. I love it. And I get spooked out. And I think it's cool.
Right.
But then, the logic side of me really does want to find
how.
out, how is this happening?
And this is what's fun is like so different between you and I. Look, I'm not a dumb person.
You're a very smart person.
I'm pretty smart, right? Like I'm okay saying that. But some stuff I just don't need to understand. So that's my thing. I'm like, I absolutely I read a bunch of stuff, and then this morning before we started recording, I'm like, BuzzFeed's top 25, stories about kids who have past lives. And they're like reported by their parents. They're like 1-sentence things, and it's like, oh my God, I believe every single one of them. Like, I do not care. Like,
okay.
I want to believe it, so I believe it. But I do think that I picked some people that are going to be hard for you to disagree with because...
Have you met me?
That's how I'd be like.
I am the most disagreeable human.
That's how I'd be like. So yeah, I think one of the things that's also, having just said how smart I am, that is kind of dumb about me, is whenever, because usually it does come in these little sentences, right? Like, oh, my kid said they were a whatever in a past life. Having read all of them, I can't think of any random examples of what a kid may have said. But on BuzzFeed, these people said this or whatever. Like these 1-sentence things. And I never connected it to reincarnation. I was just like, cool, kids with past lives. Like, I never made that, like, that connection. So it's really interesting. It seems so obvious now. But usually the stories are very brief. Like, a kid says something way weird, and you're like, that's weird. You know, can we talk about something else? Like, can we go look at something else now? And I don't know if this is the part where I should say this, but my daughter actually did say something like this to me when she was about 2. She doesn't. But when she was, I guess 2 years old, we were visiting my mom. And again, this is one of those one sentence ones because I didn't take it any further. I didn't ask her a single question. Talk about lacking intellectual curiosity. I was like, can we run from this topic? So, so she was very, very young, maybe 2, maybe 1.5. And my kid, you're not going to believe me, my kids were very, very verbal from a young age. So just believe that. Yeah, anyone who's ever been around them knows that that's the case. So very, very verbal. And so she's fairly young. And I kind of tried to, certainly at 2, I mean, this is not surprising, but shield her from any knowledge of like violence in the world. She had never seen a gun on TV or anywhere else, right? And so I'm not particularly a big fan of guns. And so she had never seen anything like that. And at my mom's house, we're just sitting on the couch hanging out, and she just pops off with, oh, my other mother died from a gun. And I was like, I'm sorry, come again? Like, what did you just say? Like, none of those words made sense to me in that order. Like, other mother, gun, like, what are you saying, tiny toddler person? And so she said, my other mother died from a gun. And I said, what other mother? And she was like, you know, my other mother before. And
like,
that was
you were
it.
Supposed
like,
to know what
that
she
was
meant.
the whole, and I didn't ask any more questions. I was like, okay, cool. Do you want to go watch a movie or something? Like, I want to run away. Like, of course, now I wish I had asked a lot more questions because it's super interesting.
It's terrifying in the moment. Like, nope.
Stop me in my tracks. Sure did. And then later, as if referencing that back, like maybe 6 months, 8 months later, we were going to go to the beach for the first time. And neither of the kids had ever seen the ocean. So we kept telling them, like, oh, it's going to be amazing. We see the ocean. And so when I was talking to her about it one night when she was in the bathtub, and this is fascinating because a lot of people say these kids come up with these stories and they're usually like in the bathtub. Like,
just
I guess
hanging out.
I guess it's the same thing when you're like, ideas come to you when you're in the shower, right? So they're in the bathtub, feeling relaxed, feeling chatty. And I said, are you excited to go see the ocean for the first time? And she said, I saw it with my other family. Like, I've seen it before. And I was like, right. The one with the gun. I didn't say that, but I was like, okay, cool. Well, let's just pretend you've never seen it. And you be appropriately sort of shocked and appalled. Or not shocked and appalled, shocked
appalled
and
at the ocean? I'm appalled.
I'm appalled at the infinity of this, you know, before me. So in my experience, it's these little sentences, and I'm totally okay with that. But you're going to love this, Virginia. A, I dare you to say my kid was lying. I dare you.
I would never call Sadie a liar. All right. You know that.
So the people that I'm using the most are, Virginia, remind me what you do again? What's your job? What's your day job?
Oh, my actual job is not just annoying you?
No.
Like my for real job that I get paid for?
The one you get paid for.
I'm a psychologist, and I'm actually a research psychologist. I'm a social psychologist by training, so I'm not even a feelings psychologist. I am like pure science.
Yep. So she's a psychology professor. Let me tell you about these guys that I use for most of my research. Psychology professors.
Oh,
eat a butt. Yes, psychology professors. Where? At University of Virginia.
Damn it!
Right up the road.
Like,
so
they're smart.
It's not a crappy school. I'll just say that. It's
not a crappy school. That's like the one of the most uncrappy schools in our state.
It's a decent school. So anyway, I used a lot of, like I said, I read around a lot on the internet, but I used a couple of books as well. And so the people who are, I think, most famous for publishing about this, both have been at University of Virginia. One is Ian Stevenson, who has since passed away, but he really did a lot of this research. He was doing it, like I said, in India a lot of the times, or Southeast Asia, and working with local folks there as well, not just being like, hello, brown people, or, you know, I'm here to study your ways. I mean, he really was like trying to understand the culture at the same time. And so Jim Tucker has written a couple of books, and one of the ones I used for today is called Return to Life: Extraordinary Cases of Children Who Remember Past Lives. And so it's interesting because he or especially Ian Stevenson, you know, because of people like Virginia, they can't necessarily be accepted in the science world. So he kind of had to go from...
I mean, I'm judging him. I'm sorry. I will not be maybe by the end. But right now, I did not personally persecute this man yet.
But, you know, he does get some of these things published in scientific journals, but he finds more and more that there's just a stigma against these kinds of things. And so Jim Tucker actually left a private practice to go work with him because he became really, really interested in what he was doing with these kind of past lives. And so Jim Tucker is a child psychologist as well. He was originally, this is what I think is so fascinating, is so he was a professor of psychology and neurobehavioral studies at UVA. And again, he works specifically with children and teens. But now he is the head of something called the Division of Perceptual Studies, which is in the medical school there.
Yeah,
the
and
medical
it's,
school.
Right, which is funny because you think he would have just like renamed it and been like, the psychology department kicked me out. But like now he's in with the medical school,
right.
Which again makes me want to hear you, makes me want to listen.
He got not less but more scientific, right?
Like,
and it makes sense if you think about the way medicine is now finally coming around to
some of those other
mind-body connections and the way stress can affect, and those kinds of things. And so I do think it's really interesting that this, and those are all Eastern ideas, right? Like this is a very Western view that these things can't coexist. So at any rate, so initially works with Ian Stevenson. Jim Tucker is someone who I use a lot for today's stories. And there's also someone named Carol Bowman who writes a lot about this. So I think any of those folks are really interesting to read if you want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
So
wait, time out.
Yes.
I am going to give a little preface that this semester at my for real job, I am teaching a course actually under your purview, sort of. Womp womp. Or womp womp is not the right word, but like hooray or whatever is the good thing.
Y'all, we're rusty.
The good version of womp womp is that in the honors college that we have on campus, a friend and I are teaching a class on horror and the psychology of fear and horror movies. Right. And so I have spent a good amount of this semester debunking things and doing all that. So I feel like I've got my like debunking hat on.
Okay. I just want to make clear that I didn't know this was the deal I thought you were just going to enjoy the stories and comment. I didn't know you were going to fight me. I didn't know you were going to fight me. I didn't know you were going to fight.
I'm not going to fight you.
Enjoyed this.
I love it. I'm going to be inquisitive.
I just want everyone to remember the ghost episode we did at this time last year.
Yeah.
And Virginia was just like, yeah, tell me more. Never once did she try to debunk a single ghost story, but I come with stories.
Bunk.
She's coming for me.
I'm
bunking them. You're trying to debunk them. Okay, so I want to start with a shortish kind of story, and then I have one kind of longer one. So one phenomenon I wasn't aware of, among many, obviously, because I'm like, past lives, reincarnation, those don't go together. So, very, very slow. I'm slow on the uptake. Was people, this is fascinating, carrying the scars or birthmarks or abilities of people who died before. I know. And some of this really so I studied midwifery in the 18th century, right? Like that's what my dissertation is on in part.
It's so cool.
It's absolutely fascinating. But one of the things that people used to believe, because they didn't understand women's bodies, because they were like, it's so tempting. Like I can't get near it or I'll have sex with it. So, whatever. And so they thought, and of course it's a way to demean and control women. They thought if a woman sort of thought about something or fantasized about something while she was pregnant, her baby would come out with the mark of that thing, right? And so they believe this. Yeah. And
Sorry.
Please, this is not the episode to tell us what Harper would look like if all of your fantasies came true.
Nope, we're good.
On
we're
that
good.
Poor child's body. So let's have a really clean example. So like if a mother craved strawberries when she was pregnant, her daughter might be born or son with a strawberry birthmark. Okay. Of course, that's pretty benign. So they would their stories were like, you fantasized about having sex with an ape. Now your kid looks like an ape. Because they really thought that women's imaginations, because they couldn't be seen and policed by men, were these wild storehouses of just orgiastic pleasure.
I mean, they are.
Just orgies all the time in there. But we're going to catch you when that baby comes out, right? So it's a way to control women. And so in this section, they do, especially I think Ian Stevenson does kind of think that maternal thoughts can mark a baby's body. Ooh. And that made me a little twitchy because I'm like, have we not moved on from this? 300 years ago, they stopped believing this, but whatever. So again, maybe in other cultures they believe this, and I'm not trying to dog that, belief system, but that one made me a little uncomfy, as we say. But so one of the things they do talk about is, for example, folks in parts of India, for example, or I think in Bangladesh, he's talking about a woman who, when someone's about to die or has just died, they put a mark on their body, like a black spot on your ankle. And then if somebody comes back and says they're reincarnated, you would look for that mark on their ankle to
Oh, okay.
determine if they were still carrying
The
that
same
marker.
person, right.
Yeah, so it's like you can intentionally try to do this, or you can kind of read this on someone's body.
Okay, cool.
One of the ones I was not going to talk about, but I am from Augusta, Georgia, so I'm just going to throw it in there.
Oh, okay.
That he talks about a little bit at the end of his book is a kid who seems to be Bobby Jones himself reincarnated, the great golfer Bobby Jones.
At first, I was like, I'm going to pretend to know who Bobby Jones is, but I have no clue. So, Bobby Jones, back up. Who's Bobby Jones?
He built Augusta National, which is where the Masters is, and our main expressway is Bobby Jones Expressway. So he's a big deal, but apparently this little kid comes out. Boop, I'm here.
It's like coming out as like I'm not gay. I'm Bobby Jones.
I have come out as a reincarnated golfer. Pick somebody more exciting, friend. Golf is disgusting. It's boring. Anyway, so he comes out and he seems like Bobby Jones or whatever. He's a killer little golfer as a toddler. And so there are all these stories about we usually only take 6 years old at this golf school, but we'll take you at 2.5 because your swing is immaculate. And then he went on to win a bunch of things, and that's not the only reason, right? Every good golf kid is not a reincarnation of Bobby Jones, but he remembers some of these old school golfers, and he could point them out in pictures and stuff. So that's an interesting example of potentially carrying the abilities of the person that you are kind of a reincarnation of, or reincarnated from, right? Yeah, he won a bunch of stuff. He won 20-something tournaments in a row. He's amazing. So at any rate, so one that I found fascinating is the story of a child named Patrick.
Hi, Patrick. Let's see what you got. I want to
settle in. Gird your loins. We're going to talk about Patrick. Okay. So Patrick was born to his mother, Lisa, 12 years after she lost another son. So really devastating, right? And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, Lisa and her husband or partner or father of the child had separated. So it was just Lisa and her son, whose name was Kevin, together, And so it was a very kind of living for each other kind of thing. They were very, very close. So 12 years after she lost Kevin, she gave birth to a son named Patrick. So Patrick is the son that we'll be talking about.
Hey, Patrick.
She had another child in between as well before Patrick came along. But she says she never was able to lose that heaviness and grief that she had been carrying from the death of Kevin until Patrick was born. And she said when he was born, she felt like a weight had been lifted, which is very sweet. So I don't know what it says about that other kid, but I'm sure that other kid was great as well.
That kid's got to be well, I'm not the cool one.
The world is heavy and dark. Hello, child. Right? It's still heavy and dark, but now here comes Patrick, and everything's okay. So not long after Patrick was born, some weird stuff started going on with him. And of course, anytime you've lost a child, everything that sort of happens medically is going to really stress you out. I mean, it's really terrifying. So she found some medical issues that were worrying. So first he had this opaque kind of milkiness covering his left eye. And he ultimately was blind in his left eye. He also had a lump right above his right ear there was no reason for it. It was just a big lump. And I guess it migrated higher up as he got older. And then a dark line on the right side of his neck he was born with. I've seen birthmarks of different shapes, but I've never seen one that's a line. But he was born with it, right? Okay. So he's got...
Comes out of the womb.
Out of the womb. Just really kind of messed up. No, just kidding. So he's got all of these things, the eye, the lump above his ear, this line on his neck. And then when he starts to walk, he had this distinct limp. So he would kind of throw out his left leg when he walked. So a really unusual gait for a newly walking young child. So lots of things that were a little bit disturbing. So all of these things are strange.
Yes.
But even stranger when you realize that each one of those things are specifically and distinctly linked to markings on his dead brother's body. So the one who had died 12 years before.
Really? Okay.
It seems wild.
It does.
And I will agree with you.
Absolutely does.
Because again, like I said, I wanted to start here because this is not something I'd ever considered was carrying markings or carrying abilities from someone else. So just knowledge. I just always thought it was memories, right? And that was where it ended.
This is physical. Yeah.
This is physical.
So wait, are you going to... I'm assuming you're about to tell me what's up with Kevin.
I'm going to say what's up with Kevin, but when we're talking about Patrick, so opaqueness over his left eye, the line on his neck, the bump behind his ear, and then walking, unusually, specifically on his left leg. So Kevin, and this is really sad, was diagnosed with metastatic neuroblastoma when he was just a year and a half. So some of the things we're talking about are the things that sent his mom to the hospital to get him checked out, right? So scans when he went to the hospital found an opacity over his left eye, which would make him blind in that eye pretty quickly. And of course, that's the eye that they found this sort of opacity in Patrick.
Okay.
There was a nodule above his right ear, which is actually what they biopsied in order to diagnose him.
Yikes.
So that
Did they?
That in the exact same place they find.
Did they biopsy it?
Not on the new kid, I don't think.
Okay.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think when something bad happens to you, you assume that thing's going to happen over and over again.
Right.
So
I don't think
they
I was
did.
thinking like,
right.
I wonder if it was like actually molecular. I don't. I'm making up science right now.
Right.
Like
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So
still creepy.
Yeah. So there's a nodule above his right ear, and they put a central line into his neck at exactly the spot where Patrick had this line. That sounds outrageous.
It does.
I am telling you, this buddy who wrote this book went back through all of the medical records to make sure that this is exactly where it was. It was on the exact same side, and then it was the same size. I'm just saying.
I know it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Stuff that
it's a lot.
Is weird and unexplainable.
And it's a lot. It's a lot.
Moment.
Yeah. So so it's really because this person is a researcher and he wants to go back and find evidence of this, and he does not want to tell any story. Like even if a parent has told him something, he's going to go talk to the person the parent talked to
before
to
he says it.
see if that can be corroborated, right? So he does want to find as much evidence as possible, which is why in this any of these books that they write, you're not going to find the one-line stories that be like, "Yep, seems feasible to me." So Kevin, who's the kid who passed away, right, 12 years before Patrick was born, walked with a limp in his left leg. And I think that was one of the markers that there was this neuroblastoma. And so he eventually broke that leg, but it was too painful for him to wear a cast. So he just couldn't put any weight on it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
weird.
Sadly, Kevin only lives 6 months past his diagnosis. I know. It's really, really sad. So so when this baby comes to her and she feels this weight lifting, and then we see all of these markers that are similar, it definitely seems unusual and very strange. And you can be a skeptic all day long. It gives me the chills. It gives me the willies.
It gives me the willies too.
Because I'm like, what? And again, like I think if we were in a culture where reincarnation was more central,
it wouldn't be as weird.
Like I don't want to suggest that it's like creepy in a bad way, but because it's something that's new to me and unusual to me, it does give me chills. Like it does make me feel like creepy. Even though reincarnation's a beautiful thing, probably, right?
Probably.
Like if you believe in it. So,
I mean, unless you've been a shit person, right? Because isn't that the whole thing?
I love that the shitheads are getting some karma through reincarnation. I vote for that 100%.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. All right, so we can believe in karma.
Yeah.
It means assholes are getting
fair.
Or reincarnation if we believe assholes are getting
They're
due.
They're due. What is it? Comeuppance. What is it?
Comeuppance.
Comeuppance.
But the fish shaking was good. That's exactly what you need.
When you with a good comeuppance.
I'm gonna give you the. It is kind of sad that we have to have some sort of promise or threat to just be nice. Like that part does make me sad. Like, I really.
But otherwise, it would just be I'll be raping and pillaging and like
I really want to kill someone right now, but I don't want to be a frog in my next life. I'm not trying to dog frogs. You know what I mean? But like, I don't. Frogs are lovely.
But also,
Yeah. Like what? Just be decent. Not because you want to be like a beautiful eagle in your next life, but because it's just the way to treat people. Anyway, so
don't be a dick. Back to life philosophy.
Don't be a dick.
Right?
Yeah. So Patrick has all of these like markings and stuff, which is something I had not ever thought of before, that really line up. And again, this researcher goes into the medical records to be like, was it really the right side of his neck? Whatever. And to see how many millimeters the cut was and all those kinds of things. So
that's kind of hard to argue with.
It's kind of hard to argue with, and I am not inclined to. And I think, honestly, I've thought about my statement about my own dumbness, and I want to say this in my own defense. Just let me continue having this one-sided conversation with myself, if you don't mind. So I do think because I think so much at work, and I'm always kind of questioning things and asking, and wanting things to be precise, I love that there's something that I don't understand. Like, that is something I want to exist in the world, are things that I don't understand, that are beyond my comprehension. So I think that's why I'm really interested in this kind of stuff. So at any rate, we have one more little thing about Patrick, which
Okay.
is so he's born with all these markers, right?
Okay.
And these
so
things
wait, we've
that are
got
similar.
the neck, the eye, and the limp.
The limp, yes, and the node above
Right,
above
the
the
node.
ear,
Okay.
right? So when he was 4, he started talking about Kevin's life as if it was his own.
No, he didn't.
He did.
He did not.
So he goes in and out of like, this is what they always say in these stories about kids is they're like, it just comes up sometimes. And if you want to talk to them about it, they're like, no, I'm not talking about that right now. Or I don't know. But then it just kind of comes out sometimes. And so he would talk about Kevin's life as memories. And so he'd say things like, Mom, when are we going to go to the old house again? Don't you remember the house where I left you?
Oh my God.
I know. Breaks my heart into a million pieces. This one has to be like one of the strongest ones because she's like, but you're here with me now, and so these really, and there were some memories that he had that were Kevin's, memories that he had never actually been exposed to. So it wasn't just the markings; it came along with these memories. Yeah,
I want it to exist too.
Yeah. Right, I know.
Like, could it have been that his mom talked about Kevin so much that like he internalized those stories as his own?
I think that's always something that you have to wonder about with these kinds of things.
I mean, the
and so
medical stuff I can't explain. But.
Right. So I think one of the things they said about when he said, are we ever going to go back to the other house? And the houses really figure prominently in these kids' memories. And like if you think about your childhood home, it's very distinctive, to you. And so
I still go there.
Well, yes, for people who move, who actually like unlike us, we live in the same house our entire lives, but for people who move, that childhood home is is like etched. And so he, I guess, described the colors of the house.
Oh.
That he remembered. And so, I think it's totally possible. And again, this researcher goes so far as like...
And he's at UVA. Like, I feel like there's so many things that, like, I can't argue with. Like, the scientists and the, like, scared little girl in me are both could you maybe make this not true?
Could it not be true? Yeah. And that's the thing. Now you all know that if you are at UVA, Virginia will believe anything that you say. But they're at UVA.
But they're smart.
And then he became reincarnated as a clown. And he could never not be a clown. Okay, well, UVA said so. But no, it is.
They also
You
have
don't
the tiki
get
torch
hired.
problem and some other things that maybe I don't agree with. But okay.
For sure. You don't get a job at UVA super easily.
Correct.
Ask us how we know. So. So at any rate, he did, even to the point, so he's trying to figure out, like, can I verify all of these things? And so even to the point where Patrick talks about going swimming with someone and, like, dunking his head underwater. And he's like, well, the guy remembers swimming with him. He doesn't remember getting dunked, but it was 19 years later, and it's like, so he is trying, like, every little detail he's trying to kind of figure out.
Okay.
And some of them are.
I appreciate his attention to detail.
Some of them are kind of, they end up being a loose end, but a lot of them he's able to corroborate. And then the last thing I'll say about Patrick, because it's absolutely fascinating, he later seemed to remember things from yet another life.
What?
Yeah.
Like another life in his family, or just like another life other than Kevin's?
Other than Kevin's.
Okay, tell me.
I'm not going to go into that because he's less detail there, and that's something that happens in enough of these cases that it's kind of a phenomenon.
That they have more than one?
There's almost like this buffer life that was kind of in between that they don't remember as much about, or maybe it was shorter. So it is really interesting. And in a lot of these cases, all the people that I named earlier who write about this think that there's a traumatic death in some way. So they died in a traumatic way or a way they sort of can't get over. And
that's why they're coming back.
Yeah. And so the in-between lives maybe are not that interesting. But he also asked his mom, Patrick did one day, do you know that we have a family member that no one talks about? And she was like,
Uncle Joe.
I didn't write this down, so I wasn't going to talk about it a lot, but it's like Pirate Billy or something like that. And so he says, his stepdad just shot him, killed him right in his face, like just cold blood, like right there, point blank. And this is what the child says
and
to
how old
his
is
mom.
he at this point?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's later than 4. They usually don't talk about it much past 6, so there are some.
Okay.
And usually 4 is like the outside, close to the outside range, because you lose those as you go, and then suddenly you're like, no, I don't remember that anymore. So he told his mom about this guy, and she's like, I don't know, now you're just making stuff up, boy. You know, like,
Yeah.
she was nicer than that. But she didn't think this person existed because they didn't talk about him. But she called her mom, and she confirmed that this person was a part of their family. Yeah. So that's interesting because when you think about if you have some connections to that, whatever other side of yourself or another consciousness, does it make you more likely to be connected to multiples? Or in one case, a kid ended up being or seemed to also be a little bit psychic.
Oh.
So when they were, and this isn't one I'm going to talk about much, but
Okay.
when they're researching his supposed past life, he says, oh, we're going to get on a plane, the three of us, and go to Los Angeles soon. And they were like, what? And they ended up going there. So he had both of those. And then,
like clairvoyant and...
yes,
Ooh.
like, but then the researcher had to say, okay, well, does he just intuit these things from past lives in the way that he intuits the future? So, you know, it opens up some doors. And so one of the explanations they have is, or that was given is there's like, I might get this word wrong, but there's like, of course, the sort of subliminal subconscious, right?
Right.
And there's like the superliminal, right? And so to protect ourselves,
Right.
we have to keep our sort of subconscious sub.
Right.
It has to stay down.
Very sub.
But, you know, and whereas a super will go down into the sub all the time. That's how the
Right,
subconscious
right.
mind is partially created. And so it's interesting that one of the ways that they try to understand this is there's just more of that subliminal that creeps up, or that
Oh, okay.
subconscious that creeps up that might be a consciousness across generations.
I
don't know.
Consciousness, we're getting like into like Jung and
I know.
Freud.
Well,
and like
they
the
said it's more
wackadoodle.
than Freud. They took a minute, like, we're not just talking about Freud's subconscious.
Okay, I
like,
mean, well-
don't be ridiculous.
Well,
but
they are at UVA. They know better than that. But
I know, hopefully. Like, Freud's our whipping boy. So, anyway,
that's nuts.
that's our boy. That's Patrick.
That's Patrick. Okay, so
Fascinating.
okay, if you were Patrick's mom,
Yes.
do you think you could sleep at night? Like, I don't think I would. Like, I don't know if I'd be comforted by the fact that Patrick's
Right.
kind of Kevin, or if I'd be like, dude's gonna
Right.
do something creepy in the middle of the night. Like,
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question because later one of the kids says, who I'm also not going to talk about, but he's like telling his siblings how beautiful heaven is, and he says, "Oh, I want to take mommy to heaven."
oh no,
And he didn't mean it in a sinister way, the way that sounds.
he just wanted her to see it.
He wanted to show her this beautiful place, and he wasn't afraid, right? And
Good.
so I'm like, "Yikes!" And so that did make me kind of think, like, "Huh." How about that? So maybe that's why it's good for everyone that they grow away from those memories
Yes.
and move on.
Okay.
Move on to just being themselves in the here and now.
Which
So,
is again less creepy and easier to sleep.
I can handle that.
Yes.
Yeah, unless yourself is kind of a jerk, but
Yeah, unless you're an asshole, and then you got to wait and be
Yes,
reincarnated,
that's
and the
right.
whole frog thing
We-
happens again.
Boy, do we have a plan for you. It's called karma. Okay, so I love all of these stories. The one that I'm going to spend the most time on is the one that's the most famous. So I apologize if anyone listening already knows this one. I already knew it.
I know nothing.
I've seen it in a bunch of places. You might, when I start talking, you might know.
Okay, baby.
I've seen it in a bunch of places. So Tucker talks about it in his book, but even before he came to the story, there had already been like a TV special about it and stuff. Like,
Oh,
this
okay.
kid is like, the memories on this kid. Okay?
Okay.
Like, ridiculous. Okay. So I'm sorry in advance if you heard this. I just think this one is fascinating. It's been on a bunch of TV shows, been written about a lot.
But not the way we've done it.
Not the way we've done
Bum,
it.
bum.
It's going to be brand new. A wank. Yeah, trust me. So the kid's name is James.
Okay. It's like a giant peach.
He will later, there is no giant peach, but he does fly.
Shit. Okay.
So yeah, see, you do know this one. It's the
No,
one-
I don't.
It's the one with the peach.
Is it?
No. it's
Oh,
not.
okay.
So he, and it's so interesting because later when he's making drawings, he like signs it James 3. And the past life he's remembering, his name was James, but he was James Jr. So they were like, why did you write James 3 on that? And that's why. At any rate, let's start at the beginning, shall we?
Well,
With James.
I can't think of anywhere else I want to start, but okay,
Let's
yeah,
start
let's
at the
start
beginning. When did you know that your child was reincarnated?
Yeah, like,
okay. Thank you for
yikes.
asking. So his parents started to recognize something was unusual when he started having these really like awful nightmares over
like-
and over again. Like not like little kid like meh, and then they're fine, but like horrible
Terrifying
nightmares.
things
Yes,
that you
yes.
could tell he was terrified.
Yes, when he's like 1.5 to 2.
Ooh.
So they aren't just any nightmares though. It's always the same one.
Oh.
And it's always a fiery plane crash. And this is what I remember from all the other media. This is when I knew, yep, I know this story. Because what sticks with me and just haunts me is he wakes up saying, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. Little man can't get out.
Little man can't get out.
And I'm like, the skeptical part of me is like, why are you calling yourself a little man? Like, were you short then? Like, what's happening? But little man can't get out. I mean, it just breaks my heart. And he would, like, later when he's recreating the dream to his mom, he's like kicking his feet up into the air, like he's trying to kind of escape.
Get out of a plane.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
It's rough. So little man can't get out, and it's really heartbreaking, and that's scary enough.
Yeah.
But by the time
I'm done there. I'm like, and you're going to go live with your aunt forever.
I believe you. Yeah, and now that you mention aunts, like some of the family members would say when they stayed over, they witnessed this, and it was really horrifying. It wasn't just like a scared little kid that you could calm down quickly. It was like intense for him, like trauma. It was trauma, right? And so, as if that's not enough, by the time he is 3 years old, he's gone ahead and told his parents that he died in a plane crash. You're 3-year-old. I died in a plane crash.
Yikes. Okay.
He said he had flown that plane off of a ship.
Like military style?
No. Exactly like military style. And was shot down by the Japanese.
No.
Over Iwo
No.
Jima. This boy, let me tell you, lives in Louisiana, right?
No,
like he's not,
there's no way.
He's not in any little World War II classes, you know.
But like, could the World War II channel, like the War and History channel, be on in the background?
I think this was before because he later on we meet some folks who had served, and so they were still alive, like in their 80s, but still alive. So I think it was. I don't know if the History Channel existed. Maybe it did.
I don't know.
Please feel free to correct me on my history. So he's a 3-year-old who lives in Louisiana, who wakes up saying little man can't get out, has traumatic, repeating nightmares about dying in a fiery plane crash, and went ahead and said, my name was James. I flew an airplane off of a ship, and the Japanese
shot me down.
Iwo Jima, come on.
I know.
My kids can't even say normal words at 3, and they were very verbal, as I said, but they're going to be mispronouncing some stuff. So, so it's wild.
So wild.
Also, at the age of 3, he gives the name of the freaking plane.
No. Nope.
He knows exactly what the plane is called, and it's a super unusual name. It's the Natoma. Natoma, the Natoma.
Okay.
Which sounds...
Is the Natoma like in a museum? I don't because it got shot down, so it's not anywhere.
Right.
God.
Right.
Damn it.
Yeah. So his dad did take him to a museum, and that's where they started seeing this interest in planes. Like he kept, it was like maybe an aviation museum.
Okay.
And he kept wanting to go back to the World War II section, and he kept pointing to all these pictures of planes. So he's got this obsession with planes. A lot of kids do, right? They're what?
A lot of kids don't know the names of them or whatever, but okay.
Even his parents didn't know that name. And what I think is really important that I'll talk about a little more later is that the dad is a total skeptic. Okay. Total skeptic. So James is given all these details, the name of the plane, and he says, I had a friend named Jack Larson. First and last name. Oh, Jackie boy. Jack Larson. Okay. So.
And where does Jack Larson live?
Well, the thing is, the kid died, remember? Before.
Oh.
Yeah. So
my bad. Okay.
It's fine. It's fine. You can be rude. You can be rude to this kid who died in a previous life.
I'm not trying to be rude. I don't want to be a frog. No frog. I don't want to be a frog.
Prove it. Where did he live? So the wild thing about this case is they were able to get a lot of records of the kid talking about this stuff before anyone even thought, like, maybe we should go see if there's actual detail to back this up.
Oh,
right?
so he had said it all before anybody...
Yes.
Oh.
Like, it was strange enough. And they've got, like, I feel like it was, like, Prime Time or some show that, like, had already interviewed him and had all of these details before anyone, the producers, the parents, anyone had thought, maybe all of this can be researched, right? Like, maybe we can. And so his parents did keep really good, like, journals of all the things he said and when he said them. But they have this independent third-party kind of
researcher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was really cool.
That is, Yep.
So you can just watch this story kind of develop alongside the facts in ways that are really fascinating. So,
okay. Keep going.
So the numbers of details this kid knows is just wild. Absolutely bananas. And if anyone tries to lead him in a different direction, not like intentionally. So like his dad was sure that this Jack Larson that he mentioned, that was his friend, had also died. He thought that's what he was dreaming of, was Jack Larson also dying.
Was the little
like,
man
with
or something
yeah.
on the plane? Okay.
And he couldn't find a record of anyone named Jack Larson dying in this way. So he was like, that probably wasn't your friend's name. Okay, little buddy. But James insisted that this was his friend's name and that his dad was the one who was wrong. Spoiler alert, the guy not only existed but was still alive. The dad talked to him and verified that he had known James. Yep. Not only did he know James, he was flying next to him when James got shot down.
He's just like a deranged little old man who doesn't know anything.
He's a plant.
Yeah.
don't believe it.
That's insane. I mean, I know he's not, but oh my God.
Yeah. So this kid would not be deterred. Like if somebody tried to tell him or like lead him down a different path. Yeah. That is, he knew his details and he knew what was true.
Wow.
And so it's interesting because this is, they want him to be able to talk about this life, but at the same time, I mean, this is trauma. Like he's reliving
and that's
this trauma.
For like a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old. That's not cool.
Over and over again. So they're trying to like let him talk about it in a way that's going to like try to heal that trauma, right? Not just capitalize on it and be like, let me take you on the TV. They really were trying to like give him peace, right? As a 3-year-old. Okay. These are the things that gave me chills, and these might be minor things to other folks who read these stories, but to me, I was like, absolutely not.
Okay, I'm going to close my eyes because it's going to make me... Okay.
The first one, that the detail to me that is the most chilling out of all, and there are tons of details in this one, was that whenever his parents put him in a car seat, he had a ritual.
What? Wait. I still close back.
Kids do have rituals, right?
Sure.
Yes. So he would put his arms up over his head and pull them down to his ears. And then he would swipe his right hand down in front of his face and stop at his chin. So he gets in the car seat, he pulls his arms down, and then swipes over his face. And his parents are like, okay, whatever. That's unusual. So when he was 3.5, they took him to an air show because he loved planes, right? He loved military planes. He got to sit in a cockpit, right? Like touch a plane day, whatever. Woo-hoo! He got to sit in the cockpit. His mom saw him put on the headgear and swipe the microphone down to his mouth and realized it was the exact same motions he made every time he got into a car seat.
Holy blah, blah, blah.
I was like, nope.
That's...
So like the car
I'm a little
seat
tingly.
is like,
I'm a little tingly. Like, not...
Don't you make me so tingly?
I so tingles.
But yeah, I mean, I guess you could think about like a cockpit being like kind of an encompassing seat or like a...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that one got me. Maybe because, I don't know. Because I got kids. Can you picture like that kind of ritual and then connecting it to that kind of like automatic kind of movement that's in your body, right? Like
he already just did it. Oof.
Mercy. Okay. So
that one got me a little.
That one's a lot.
Is that just one of the many details or is that like...
That's one of two that I think are kind of haunting about just seeing your kid do this stuff.
That's insane. Do you time out real quick?
Yeah.
I know this is a tangent real quick.
Yeah.
Remember when we had the college kids play in the helicopter? Like,
yeah.
I was just that's made me think that. I was like, oh, okay.
Everybody wants to have a
Everyone
touch
wants
a
to
plane
touch. Yeah, like no matter how old you are, you want to touch a plane.
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Boys, girls, everyone,
touch
gender non-conforming folks, jump in that cockpit.
Yeah. Right. But maybe don't do the creepy thing.
A 3-year-old in a car seat, please don't.
Yeah.
Please actually don't. And then the other thing his parents said was every toy plane he had, he crashed into the coffee table until the front broke off because he said that his plane was shot right there in the very front. So they found out later it was a single propeller plane. So, yeah, right in the front. And the book said, the book that I read about this as well said that the parents were very patient because the dad showed him a picture of the coffee table, which is just like beaten all to hell because the kid would just like if I had that kid, I'd be like, you were violent. Like we need
to get to do that.
I'm taking you to therapy, not to help you, but because I'm afraid you're going to kill someone. Because I mean, imagine just like every plane you get, you're just like die. Yeah. But that was his thing. That was his thing. It happened to him in a previous life. So okay, so some of the details this kid knew were bonkers. Like I said, like detail. So he at 28 months named the type of plane he was in, which was a Corsair, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So he named the type of plane he was in, and some people were like, well, when you went to the aviation museum, you probably saw it there, and he remembered it. I mean, like, I'm not sure he's reading the names of planes at 28 months, but whatever.
Yeah, because 28 months in real people time is right 2.
He's not even 3 yet.
Yeah, he's a little, okay.
And so people were like, the skeptics were kind of like, well, but he probably just saw that in the museum. Okay. So they actually went back and looked, and that plane had been removed from the museum for years because it had to be fixed or something. I don't remember the details.
So it wasn't there when he was there.
So they went back and verified. The dad did, and then the researcher did, went back and verified that it was actually not in the aviation museum. It was like the plane that wasn't there when the kid was there, which is wild. So when he looked at models of planes later, like low play planes or models online, he would correct them. He'd be like, oh, is that supposed to be this kind of plane? Well, no, there was actually an antenna right here. Like little details like that. Like he really understood the bodies of planes and what they would have been like. And at one point, it's like his mom was flying with playing with this little toy plane with him, and there was like a tank on the bottom.
Okay.
She was like, "Oh, that holds this," and he was like, "No, actually, that's a fuel tank," or and she was like, "Okay, excuse me."
Yeah.
Know it all. I would
Scary, though.
like quit buying him planes. He's just going to break them.
Like,
but
maybe
yeah,
he could just be autistic and like really
have researched a lot of planes. Yeah, I think.
But I know not it.
I think that's
but
possible,
not it too in a little bit. Like,
yeah. Yeah. And again, the dad was a skeptic. So I think he was always trying to disprove rather than trying to prove.
Okay,
but in a loving way. Like he wasn't like, you little liar. He was like, stop trying to get attention. He was always kind of like quietly on the side, writing stuff down and like
maybe this
looking
could be,
stuff up.
yeah.
Okay. And he would even at one point say like, oh, those planes were a pain to land. Their wheels were absolute trash. And they would look up or they would ask folks who had flown those planes and they'd be like, oh, they were notorious for, having this or that. Whoa. So absolutely interesting. So,
okay.
Because kids do, you're right. Like kids who get obsessed with certain things will memorize every detail and then show off that knowledge.
Correct.
But these were like casual, it seemed like, conversations. So, oh, look at this plane. Isn't this cool? You love planes. Look at this plane. Cool plane. The end, right? And he'd be like, oh, is that supposed to be, I'm going to make something up here, like an FE-23? Well, that actually had an antenna right there, And so it was wild. Or one story he told was like, oh, we used to put a couple of drops of oil in that tank before we dropped it because it would make a more impressive explosion when it dropped. And like other soldiers actually verified that. They would sort of have these makeshift kind of napalm bombs that they would try to like amp up that bomb before they dropped it to make to do more damage.
Yeah.
So we won't talk about that. But okay, so
crazy.
It's important to know that his dad was a skeptic, as I've said. He was always trying, like Tucker quotes him as just saying bullshit several times.
All the time.
Like when this kid tells him something, like wakes up, like, little man can't get out. He's like, bullshit. I just don't believe it. It didn't jive with what he believed. Yeah, in terms of his religious beliefs. So one of the things, when James was talking about a nightmare, the dad was like, he said, I got shot down. My plane was shot. And the dad said, well, who shot you? And James, exasperated, he was like, the Japanese. Like, you fucking idiot. Like, catch up, man. Like, have you ever read a book about World War II, friend? Like, and he was like so exasperated. And then his dad shows him a world map, the entire freaking world. Okay. Like this massive 2-page situation, which the researcher looked at and measured. So if you want to know how many inches it is, you can look at his book. And he says, all right, show me where you were shot down. And he just points to kind of the middle of the Pacific Ocean or like a certain part in the Pacific Ocean. And they look, and it's this certain archipelago. Okay. And then they look further, and in tiny print it says Iwo Jima, right where he pointed. Now, could my kids at 17 and 14 find anything but the 7 continents on a map? And even then, it's probably 5. So this kid like points exactly where it was. So the dad's always, kind of trying to test him on this. And he passes. I'm just going to go ahead and say James passes the test. And the dad actually has to be, he just comes around. He's like, there's
eventually
no
it's
way.
Like, there's no other explanation.
All of these details are too much. But he continues to kind of do research on the side. So he doesn't just like take James to these places and parade him around and be like, tell us what you know. He goes out on his own, and does this stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
So the kid spends all of his time talking about this. Like he's obsessed with this event. It's all he talks about. He draws hundreds and hundreds of pictures of this event happening, which is a trauma response, right? And so they're trying to let him get it out, but also help him heal. And over time, they confirm every single thing that he has said. And the details just keep coming. I mean, you could write an entire book. Probably entire books have been written on this kid. But the details just keep coming. So
did he ever forget? Like...
See, that's interesting because he seems to talk about it well past when normal. Okay. Not normal.
When the normal afterlife children.
Kids, talk about it. Like, I swear they said he was still talking about it at 12. And I think the reason your skepticism grows the older the kid gets, right? Because certainly at that point,
you've heard things.
He's taking in everyone's responses to him and that sort of stuff, reading his own books and all those kinds of things. So a lot of the details that I'm talking about were when he was really young, although I think the detail I'm going to end on in a second, he was 6.5. So
I'm sure it's just
still
creepy.
Still wild. So the dad kept researching. He had to kind of let go of the skepticism. He went to a Natoma Bay reunion. So remember the plane was called the Natoma for survivors. And he didn't tell them about his son. He said he was writing a book.
Okay.
So he was not.
So no
like,
kid, no.
No
Like, they
kid
didn't
was
know
there.
he was coming. Okay.
No, he was just like, I want to write a book. I'm interested. He learned in this group that there was only one pilot who died, and his name was James Houston, which is who the name his kid gave. Right? You know what I say about your skepticism? Let it go, let it go. Sometimes kids do creepy shit. Let it go. So that's the person James said he was, and everyone there, without knowing who this guy was, said that's the only guy who died.
Wow.
What's more, he found James's friend, Jack Larson, and confirmed all of the details that the child had been given. So like I said, Jack actually was flying next to him, was not dead as the dad thought, and that's why he couldn't find him, but was flying next to him and saw him get shot down and said by the time we got to him, it was just an oily spot on top of the water. Like you just could not.
My God.
Yeah. Which is chilling and devastating when you think about a child trying to deal with that kind of trauma.
Like in a dream at night.
Horrifying. Yeah.
Even
like,
for a grown-up. Like,
well, right,
or I'm
exactly.
sure the actually happening stuff.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Immensely, I'm sure, but.
Right. And that trauma response is like in his body. Right. So, and some other interesting things, and I don't want to go into everything, but James, the kid, gave the names and ages of his siblings in his past life. All of those were correct. He noted, so his mom walked in his room with a glass of wine one night, and he said, my dad was an alcoholic.
Oh, okay.
He said he had to go into a hospital for 6 weeks about it. So they asked, and this is a case where the mom reached out to the sister. So when the researcher came back and tried to do it, the woman was in her 80s or whatever, so he couldn't confirm it in the same way. But they reached out to the sibling, and she confirmed the bit about the father.
Oh my gosh.
And said, yeah, he was an alcoholic. He did have to be, and she said our other sister wrote for the society pages, and she was mortified that her mom had to clean houses because dad went, into this. So,
but yeah, treatment centers are good.
Well, certainly at that time.
Oh yeah,
probably
stigma.
not less. A lot of stigma. Yeah.
Fair.
Which good for him for getting treatment. But so this sibling confirms a lot of what he's saying about his young life, which is absolutely wild. But what she also had was a bunch of pictures of James Houston, her brother, right?
Okay.
And one of them was in front of a Corsair plane, which is the one that he had named. Now, people thought this was a part of the story they could prove wrong because there were not any Corsair planes in that particular military execution, right? Like in that, I can't think of the word, but in that campaign, they were not using Corsairs. So they were like, see, he named the wrong plane. Like it's probably just something he picked up somewhere, whatever. So she has this picture of him in front of a Corsair, and they found in these pictures that he had been among a group of pilots who tested that Corsair for the Navy.
Oh.
So this is why, and this is the one that maybe his dad or someone asked about later, and he's like, oh, those were a pain in the butt to land, the wheels were jacked. It's because he flew them over and over and over again to see if they were going to be
usable for
the Navy or what they needed to do to change them. So all of those pictures are really helpful in confirming.
That is
and also the presence of a living sister and living friend,
right? And
like
siblings and all the things. Like,
oh my
gosh, yeah. I got
wacky.
nothing other than
it's wacky.
Spooky. Okay, I believe you. Like I do. Like I.
Yay! This episode can exist.
I don't like being wrong.
Yeah,
but I think I might be wrong. Like that's
this one. You've got to go read more about this guy, or like watch the little TV shows. Like it is. The details
so
are wacky, absolutely wacky. And again, you can see how skeptics might be like, well, kids who get obsessed with military stuff or with planes or with anything are going to go memorize everything. But he was so young, and his parents weren't into it. Like it's. So the last thing I'll tell you about him is that at 6.5.
Okay.
James himself attended one of these reunions. Okay. And he was just kind of walking around with his mom talking about stuff. And some of the veterans there said they heard him say stuff that was like absolutely accurate. And they give examples of that in the book. So like, who the hell is this little 6-year-old?
Like knowing all this like man shit.
As if
like,
he was there. Yeah. And so not like a historian talking about it, but like talking about the planes and what went wrong with them.
As if he lived it.
Yeah. And then this one guy walks right up to him and says, hey kid, who am I? 80-year-old dude. Names him immediately. Tells him what his name is.
No.
And that's where I'm going to end with this guy.
No.
Yes. Yeah. The guy said, hey, what's my name? And he said he recognized his voice. Because obviously he doesn't look the same. He's 80, right?
Right.
So he recognizes the voice and, tells him who he is.
And that guy, I'm guessing, never slept again. Right. Like, never had a peaceful night of sleep ever again.
Can you imagine, though, wanting to talk to someone like that? You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the horrible things of being in war is watching people die in front of, like, especially this close friend of his, like watching someone, but you can't like talk to a 6-year-old in the same way that you would talk to
an adult,
a grown man. So I feel like I would have very conflicted feelings about, because
those
there's such a
coming out of
camaraderie.
their mouth. Yeah, absolutely.
And there's such a like family atmosphere and camaraderie with people who serve together, especially who have again endured trauma together.
Right.
So
that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. So yeah, this kid is, I think, the poster child, and I think it's interesting that UVA, right, and I'm sure other schools are letting some of this kind of seep in. You know what I mean?
I mean, he based on what you said, he's been there a long time. It's not like this is new.
Oh yeah,
right?
Oh
like
yes,
the one guy
absolutely.
retired, like so he'd clearly been there.
Well, he died.
Yeah.
I don't know which came first.
Retired.
He probably retired. Maybe he retired.
When he died, he didn't teach anymore. So I'm guessing he retired.
So some of us will have to teach after we're dead.
I know, right?
Who can afford to retire in this economy? Yeah. So I do think it's interesting because again, I go back and forth because it is kind of this. I don't think, and we know this intellectually too, but like we don't realize the extent to which our social mores and expectations are dictated by our religion, right? Like our national religion,
so like we
right?
Can't
Even if we don't,
in this because
like we
crazy.
see something as like absolutely absurd because it's not in our consciousness
like
or
our
awareness,
lexicon of our
or like
anything.
Recently, one of my students was sort of making fun of Mormonism, which had to be like, we're not going to. That's not a thing we're going to do in this class. Like, we're not going to make fun of anyone's religion. I don't care if there aren't any Mormon students in this class. Like, we're not going to do that. And I'm like, most religious foundational stories are on their face absurd, right? Like if you're thinking about it logically. And so you just want to think about somebody else's faith tradition
being
as
more
absurd,
ridiculous,
but yours is obviously, right?
The right
like
way.
the virgin birth is obviously unproblematic entirely. And so I think, so much of that pervades the way we look at the world that this seems sillier than some stuff we do believe that,
That's
so
true.
I do think it's interesting. But I don't know how, like I said, I'm fine with not understanding everything or like controlling everything with my mind grapes. But I want to know, like, well, how do you say it happens? Do you know what I mean? And so I think that like subliminal or subconscious versus supra is interesting.
When does it cross over? Or like when does it?
But one of the in Psychology Today.
Okay, womp womp.
I know.
Okay.
But this part is true because we say this when we talk about generational trauma.
Okay.
Right? That our RNA is chemically modified by experiences of family members.
That is true.
Going back at least 3 generations.
That's true.
So that doesn't, for someone like James, who we were just talking about, he wasn't in his family.
Right.
Right? So that doesn't explain that. But if we're talking about people who like Patrick, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Patrick and Kevin.
And how did I pull that out?
I am
because
you are such a good listener. You're such a good listener, and I appreciate it. So that's
okay.
I think that's an interesting way to think about it as something that we know to be true, right? Something that has been proven is that and again, it's starting to bridge that mind-body gap that we were not comfortable with before.
Still not.
I know. Well,
hand raised.
That's fair. Did we or did we not start this episode off calling it Creepy Kids? Yes. Not comfortable with it entirely, but
it's
fascinated by it because it's not a part of what we do. So a couple of just final notes.
Okay.
I will say there's another kid in the book who's fascinating, and he said he was an actor in Hollywood. And he named some random black and white movie that nobody had ever seen.
Oh, okay.
And his mom goes and finds a movie, and he points to a picture of himself. Says, "That's me." And he was an extra, so it was almost impossible to find. He had like no lines.
Extra in a show,
like in a black and white old ass movie, right? They're trying, and then he says like, "I was so rich, I had this really fancy house in Los Angeles," and he looks at a picture of Marilyn Monroe and calls her Mary, and he says, "Nobody will let you get near Mary," like all this kind of stuff. So he's got all these things about how rich he was, and a lot of people were like, "Dude, as an extra, no, you weren't." But when they finally tracked down who he was, he became an agent. So he was like, "Oh, I was in New York and I sang and danced." Like he did. He was a singer and dancer in New York, like all these kinds of things. It's absolutely fascinating. So at any rate, one of the things that that you see in some of these stories is because people will be like, "Well, what happens in between?"
Yeah.
Right? Like, where do you go?
Until you inhabit
Even though we're
person.
already talking about the disconnect and then reconnect between body and mind, right? We're still like, no, you got to go somewhere, right? Like if consciousness is going to continue, it's not going to end.
Right. It's got to.
It can't stop in the middle.
Right.
And then
So how do you,
regenerate.
So where do they go?
So they all, many of them say different things.
Okay.
So one of the things.
You're smiling, so I can tell it's going to be ridiculous.
James, well, I just think it's sweet.
Oh.
Yeah. You're such a cynic. So James says that he chose his parents. And you will see a lot of these stories where kids say that. Like, you look sad, so I chose you, or you seem so nice, so I chose you. So he tells a story about his dad raking leaves in the yard, and the dad says something sweet like, I'm so lucky that, you're my son. And he said, well, I chose you because I could tell you were going to be
Oh my God.
a nice dad. So I was up in heaven, I saw you, and I knew you would be nice.
And I chose you.
So James says that he remembers heaven because his mom was asking him about, I know how you feel.
I know
how you feel. He remembers heaven, and she said, where is it? And he said, it's everywhere. And his mom said, what is God like? Is he a man or a woman?
Oh.
Yeah. And James says, neither.
Oh.
But whoever you need at that time. That's who God is.
Okay, that's adorable and touching and amazing and sweet.
Thing? Yes, absolutely. So that's really sweet. And he told a bonkers story about choosing his parents, and he talked about how his mom wanted him to be a girl. He grills. I'm sure he didn't think he was grilling his mom. He was like, why'd you think I was going to be a girl? And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But apparently after the ultrasound, she found out he was going to be a boy. She cried her ass off because she wanted a girl. And then went out to dinner with the dad and was like, oh, I'm so devastated. And she says she's humiliated, embarrassed, of course, because of course you want the kid that you get. You
want the healthy kid. Or
you realize once they come that
that's the one you got.
That like their genitalia does not matter. Like that you can love and raise that kid no matter what. And he was like, why were you so sad that I was a boy? So all these kinds of wild things that he could not have known. Like they never would. You could believe that they fed him everything else, but for her to say, remember how I didn't want you? That's not it. Not so he says you don't have to come back, but you can choose to.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I think is fascinating. And then Patrick, who I already told you about, so he's the one who was reincarnated as brother, said that he went up to heaven and he wanted to take his mom there, which, again, I didn't think was a threat. Now, this is the one that gave me chills. So another girl they talked about, who I didn't tell you her story, but her mom was like, well, where did you go? Right? Like, this is the perennial question. Like, where did you go before you came back? And she said, nowhere. She just disappeared. She said she went into the air and broke into dust.
What?
And she said it wasn't scary. And other people made friends with her while she was there, and they were also dust.
So she has dust friends.
Dust in the wind.
Wow.
All we are is dust in the wind.
All we are is dust in the wind.
Those are my creepy stories about
Those were extra creepy.
Not creepy kids.
Yeah, like...
How is it possible?
I don't
and also,
know.
like, why... I mean, one of the other questions is, like, why doesn't every kid
do this?
have
Or maybe
a story
they're just afraid not to say it.
Right.
Or maybe they don't get picked.
Yes. Yeah. Or you choose not to come back.
Right. Whoa. Well, folks, I've got nothing other than, oh my God, that's creepy.
Do you really like them?
No, I really do. No, I really, really do.
Yeah.
And so I might even go find some of my own, but those are
so
good.
They're so, I mean, and like I said, there are these ones, I'm happy with the simple ones. Like, I'm not this researcher. I'm like, tell me a one-line story about your kid. I'm just going to read like the first one.
Do it.
So, my 4-year-old told me about the time she went for a swim in the lake and could hear her mom yelling and crying out to her, but she couldn't come because she was under the ducks. Then she remembers falling asleep, and when she woke up, I was her new mommy.
Whoa. Under the ducks.
Yeah. So, like, that's all it takes for me. I'm not doing any research.
Yeah, there's probably ducks.
I'm not going to a fucking aviation museum. No, thank you. I'm just going to be like, oh, did you say that your kid said that? I believe it. Like, I don't.
Those
are
hard.
Fine with it.
I want them. Yeah. Like, I don't know how I feel. I'm conflicted.
Yeah.
But I do love them.
Yes.
I like listening to them. They were amazing.
And I think certainly some people, I mean, kids like to get attention. So if they learn that talking about something gets them attention,
they're going to continue.
They're going to continue to talk about it.
But the specifics are just
Yes.
too specific, right? Like
also,
they can't look up that shit.
Right. They don't have encyclopedias like we used to. But also like some of
Britannica and what was the other one? There was like two big.
I had
brands.
Childcraft, which was like a children's
I think I had
specific
World
encyclopedia.
Book.
Oh yeah,
And
World Book.
Encyclopedia
They sell
Britannica.
those door to door, which no one listens to right now.
Yeah,
Like,
I
vacuum
remember.
cleaners and encyclopedias.
We had both of them, and
Can
like,
you imagine now people be like, I don't want to know shit, and just like slam the door in your
I
face.
know before
like,
you had to like listen to them talk
why
about
would
their
I want an
vacuum and like
encyclopedia?
volumes of encyclopedias.
Yeah. But one of the things that people, have said who have these kids who seem believable is like when they actually ask about it, the kid doesn't want to talk about it. It's only when it sort of comes up naturally. And they also all talk about a demeanor changing in their kids. So
Like
that they
when
get
it
very
happened.
serious. They often have a vocabulary that you would not expect them to have. Like the kid who said he was this actor, he asked for a drink that like hasn't existed in decades.
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, you want a what? And he says, just kidding, Dr. Pepper. Because it's like, oh yeah,
It's so weird.
That
Okay.
doesn't exist anymore. So so they get very serious when they talk about it. So I think you can tell if they're exhibiting behavior that's like, look at
Attention
me kind of
grabbing.
behavior rather
Yeah.
than just like, what the hell? I'm a 3-year-old who remembers dying in a plane crash. Can I work through that? Like, can I talk about that? So
Do they have special therapists?
absolutely stunning. Well, I don't know because that's what the guy who wrote the book. I mean, he's a child therapist. But,
Oh, right. So maybe he's
yeah, and then the woman I mentioned. I'm so bad with names today. The woman I mentioned who I'm getting there. Carol Bowman,
Okay.
I think also has worked with children.
Okay,
I think,
so
if I remember that correctly. So
they do try to help the children,
Oh,
not just like
absolutely,
make them
yeah.
like a little like weird case study.
Yeah,
of
I think
sorts.
they're, and you can see when Tucker is talking to kids, Jim Tucker, he's like, I know when I get there, they're not going to trust me. They're not going to talk to me. I'm just going to chill. And whatever they tell me, they'll tell me. And then I'll ask them questions. And so it's not one of those things that's like, kid,
Forced you.
make me a celebrity, right? Like make me money. So yeah, I think this is super fascinating. I could read and talk about it all day.
I could listen to you
Yeah.
talk about it all day.
Yay.
But instead,
We should probably end this episode. Yeah.
go. But if you guys have any good ideas or if you
Oh,
think of any other
please,
stories
yes.
and you want us to talk about them,
Share them.
share them because we will. But this is welcome. This is our welcome back episode.
Welcome back. Welcome to your funeral.
Yeah. And so we're back.
So I also want you to reach out to us whenever you want, except don't tell me this has been debunked. I
Yeah,
don't wanna
no.
know that.
Don't ruin Beth's
I
soul.
did research. Yeah, like I did my research.
Yeah, don't crush your soul.
I read my books.
No soul crushing.
Yeah.
But
Anything else,
inquiries
please reach out. Yeah,
are
inquiries,
awesome.
stories.
And if you can think of something you want us to just talk about or look at or you want our opinion on, we're
I got opinions.
We're here. We got so many opinions.
I got
like,
opinions.
Tons. And we're willing to talk about them.
Yeah, 100%. And we've got 2 really great funerals coming up, full of the most beautiful Southern accents you have ever heard. You know what's taken a while? Getting the transcription right, because AI does not understand
And South.
the Southern accent.
It does not.
So
We've got some doozies in there that you're like,
do.
that is not what that
That's
said.
not what she said at all. Yeah, so please join
Stay
us for those
tuned
funerals.
for 2 new funerals.
Yes. All right, enjoy your spooky season.
Woo! Halloween.